Welcome to the OPSQC Podcast, helping entrepreneurs, innovators, and small business owners scale to profitability. The goal of this podcast is to showcase real businesses, real owners, tell their stories, learn a little, and have some fun while doing it. In this episode, we interview Joe McDermott, COO and CFO of Carma.net. Carma is a SaaS telecom network inventory solution. Joe's brother Frank realized there was a huge shortcoming in the industry as far as tracking inventory and its usage and high defect rates. He brought this idea to Joe to fix that, and Joe, with his vast startup experience and pedigree, decided to give it a shot and give it a run. Joe and I first met in 2015 at another startup called Arcanum Alloys. This is an incredible story as well as a personal journey. So without further ado, please welcome Joe McDermott. Welcome, Joe McDermott. How you doing, McD?
It's good to see you. It's been a while, but we're really glad to reconnect and talk through what we've been up to.
It's been way too long. And for the listeners, Joe and I used to work together at a startup called Arcanum Alloys. And Joe left to pursue some other ventures, which is where he's at now with Carma. So, Joe, you want to give some flavor or background to what Carma is?
Yeah, so Carma is a company that I started with my brother coming up on 5 years ago now. And really the original goal of Carma was to do professional services for the telecom and data center industries. And so we really started out with the professional services side with a software component that we use primarily for internal communication for our teams. But it was always on our roadmap to take that piece of software, which is called Carma, and license that as the primary source of revenue for the company. So we originally started out on the pro services side. As we got into that, it became very, very clear that some of the assumptions that we had were incredibly right. But then some of the assumptions that we had were just totally off base, and we really saw some opportunity in those places where we were where we weren't exactly right about the world. So that's kind of where we are today.
Okay.
Happy to dive into all of those different pieces.
Awesome. And so what's the legal entity of Carma?
Sure. So we're a C Corp. We're registered in Colorado. When we originally started the company, it was registered as a C Corp in Delaware. And the reason why we chose Delaware initially is we thought that there's an okay chance that we'd be raising money early on in the company. And just what I know from my background with venture-backed startups, professional investors tend to like C Corps registered in Delaware for the protections that they give to the investors. We really found over time that was just more trouble than it was worth, especially since we really didn't need to raise money early on in the company. So just the difficulty or the extra friction of having a registered agent in Delaware that you have to do all of your business filings through for basically no benefit for us. So it's a lot easier for us. We can just go onto the Colorado Secretary of State, file a form, file a statement of information, and then be done with it, rather than contacting a local agent, paying them $200 to file a $10 form.
Exactly. And just so the listeners know too, you're located in Bakersfield, California too. So even though the headquarters in Denver, Colorado, you've been either traveling if you need to, or you've been doing this remotely, right?
That's right. So I live in Bakersfield. I am the one of two remote employees that we have. Everyone else is in Colorado, focused or centered on Denver. When we first started the company, we were based in Denver, but we had people kind of spread out throughout the East Coast. And the reason being is that part of our business is that we have field techs who travel around to data centers that are located kind of all over the place. Think of any place that's big enough for an NFL team is a place that's big enough for us to have. All right, we can edit this out.
It's all
Turn
right.
on Teams. I thought I was on. All right. So early on, we had employees kind of spread throughout the East Coast, and that was because our field techs travel to data centers to do physical audits of the data centers. And they're basically centered in large cities. Any place big enough for an NFL team is certainly a place that we would be traveling to, but then some smaller cities as well.
Okay.
And what we really thought is that we would be able to save on travel costs by having employees located all over the place.
Sure.
And what we really found is that we had people in Northern Virginia and people in Florida, and just the way that projects would work out is that the people in Florida were traveling to New York and the people in Northern Virginia were traveling to Atlanta, and it just never worked out the way that we thought it would.
Right.
And what we found is that, at least at that point, not having people in the office was a real kind of detriment to building a culture for the company.
Sure.
You know, the world has changed a little bit now. Everyone's a lot more comfortable with the kind of spread out workforce. But even so, I still think that, particularly when you're getting things going early on, having a team that's all in the same place really works well for building that kind of culture.
Sure. And you mentioned you're in business with your brother.
That's right.
Because, you know, early on, you know, a lot of people always told me don't do business with friends and family, but you and your brother are making this work. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, your brother, how it came into this? I mean, because I think you mentioned it was his idea, right?
It was. And so the thing is that I'm not a telecom guy. So I'm a tech guy. I spent time in Silicon Valley. I went to business school, but I am not a telecom guy. And one thing that I had never really appreciated is that there's telecom and there's IT, and those things are totally separate before getting involved. And so he was really the industry expert. He still is the industry expert. And I was more on the software and the business side. And the things that he was telling me about, he's lived and breathed the problems that we're working on for the past 15 years. And the thing that I had never appreciated about telecom is that people are running these massive networks doing huge amounts of revenue, $250, $500 million a year. And they're running their inventory on Excel spreadsheets. It was just mind-boggling to me that they are running these they don't have the tools that are available to everyone else in different industries. And so they're running these incredibly complex networks with very siloed systems, so that there are systems that do a really good job of like outside plant, or a really good job of CRM, or a really good job of finance. They're working in these incredibly siloed systems that don't talk to each other. And it leads to huge issues with the data quality that they're running their businesses on. And so one of the things that, one of the numbers that we tell people that we see is that in telecom, the inventory defect rate is like 21%.
Wow, that's high.
And a lot of people that we talk to say, no way, it's got to be at least double that. And in some places it is. And if you can imagine trying to run a 7-Eleven or a Home Depot where 30% of your inventory was wrong, you'd be out of business, you know, in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Especially when you're paying huge amounts for the services that you don't need to be paying for.
Sure.
And so I saw this as, you know, for someone from the outside, this is an incredible opportunity for us to go make a really big difference, not just financially for these companies, but in the lives of the people that work at these companies and the people who are served by these companies, right?
Sure.
So if you look at the most hated industries, there's government, which isn't really an industry, but government ranks like 23% as people say, all right, I hate government the most. But right after that, at 22 or 21% is telecom.
Okay.
Just think of the experience that you've had either with your cell phone provider or cable operator or any internet provider.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are like, nah, those are companies that I really don't like, because every time I've had to deal with them, it's been miserable.
Sure.
It's not that these companies want to be difficult to deal with. It's they're doing something that's really hard, and they don't have the tools to enable them to do it well.
Right.
And so the thing that I like to think back to is, remember when cell phones first came out,
Mm-hmm.
and they were mailing those phone book sized bills to people.
Oh yeah.
If you look at and that was a lot of people's first like real contact with the wireless providers, like the
Sure.
modern telcos. There are many of these businesses that still send bills in between each other exactly like that.
No kidding.
And it's unreal. There are service providers that their only job is to take bills from one company, scan them, put them into a format for another company to be able to pay.
Interesting.
And that's a lot of the telecom world.
Wow.
And so it just seemed like this incredible opportunity to go out and take some of the tools that have been developed and even delivered by the telecom industry, right? I mean, we're in the real beginning of the heyday of cloud computing, right?
Right.
And most of these companies are running either homegrown or one-trick pony systems on bare metal servers that sit in their office or in one of their data centers that aren't connected to the cloud. It's just bonkers. So what we're doing at Carma, our vision is that there's one system delivered by the cloud using all of the technologies that have been developed for software as a service, and you run your entire business on that platform.
Okay.
So it's your operational support system, it's your business support system, it's your CRM, it's your field ticketing system, it's everything you need to be able to deliver service to your customers. It's workflow for your employees. It's even customer facing portals. And the real thing is everyone's looking at the same data. It's one database where all of your business, financial, customer information lives. And even though you have different people in the organization who focus on one particular part of that, it's all talking to each other, and it's all delivered in a way that it's accessible and it's secure. So our software, Carma, will run on a desktop, on your mobile phone, on a tablet. It will run on the Microsoft HoloLens, and that's something that I would love to show you at some point, but it's just augmented reality has really come a long way, and it's just an exceptional technology. But it's all about bringing together people with good data and letting people run their business to deliver an exceptional customer experience, an incredible experience for the people who work in these companies, so that at the end of the day, that 21% of bad data goes away. Because that just drives so many problems in the entire organization.
That's, I admire you guys for tackling such a huge industry like that, right? And trying to pivot the large ship, right? And try and pivot as fast as you can. So a lot of admiration there. Going back to the time where your brother came to you with this idea, right? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall. What was that interaction like? And when he presented this to you, what was your reaction?
Well, so for a long time, I had no idea what my brother actually did. So his background, so we were both Air Force officers. I was in the Air Force Research Lab. He was in the space and missile field. So he started out as a nuclear weapons officer, so one of the guys sitting down in the silos. Okay. And then after that, he went to satellites. So he learned all the communications architecture. Sure. And in addition to talking to the satellites, there's a huge amount of ground architecture, particularly fiber, for all of that communications infrastructure. So once you get the information down to earth, you then disperse it across your networks. And so he did that, and then he left and went to a company called Level 3, which, if you're not familiar, and I certainly wasn't, it was one of the large carriers for internet and voice.
Okay.
They've since been acquired by CenturyLink, which is now called Lumen, but he ran their transport design shop.
Okay.
And transport in the telecom industry means basically big circuits connecting primarily from cities to cities, high bandwidth transport.
Sure.
And so everything that rides on top of that, so voice, IP, a lot of, at this point, even cable TV, everything that runs on the internet runs across transport.
Okay.
Even at this point, plain old 911 services run across transport.
Okay.
In his role, he ran the transport design shop. It would take them anywhere between 60 and 90 different systems to design, provision, test, turn up, and monitor a coast-to-coast circuit.
Wow.
And what he found is that the data was so bad that they would frequently have to redesign circuits. And so they would go out, they would get an order for a circuit from a customer, they would design it, they would go to install it, and then they would find, oh, there's already a circuit on those ports that we wanted to use. And so then what would happen is it would go back to the beginning of the process. Meanwhile, you've given the customer your firm order commit that said, I will deliver this service to you on this date, and you miss it. And that happened.
Not surprising.
Exactly. And so you have a customer order that says, I want to start paying you for this service on this date, and it's going to be at least a month delayed. And then you go and try and do it again, and it's another month.
Oh, God.
And this is one of the places where you see this terrible data. And this was the life that he was living when I had no idea what he was doing.
Doesn't sound like fun, actually.
And so the crazy thing is that you started seeing all of these really bad behaviors that start growing up in the industry. And what happens is you start having customers trying to game that system.
Sure.
And so what the customers do is they say, hey, Mr. Carrier A, you're so bad at delivering service, and so is everyone else in the industry. I'm now going to place the same order for you to Mr. Carrier B and Mr. Carrier C. And so what happens is you start getting these orders that the customer never intends to go through with for all of these different people.
Really?
And they'll take the first circuit that gets turned up and then disconnect all the other ones. But and so people, like, you get all these really crazy things. But what we found is that a lot of the worst offenders in the data that we would find are those types of circuits, because someone got an order for this big circuit and they went to go install it. The customer cancels it right away because someone else got it to them first.
Okay.
And then disconnecting all of those individual pieces that you had to order to deliver that circuit doesn't happen, right? And so you've got 5 different cross connects that you're paying for $350 a month. You've got a $2,000 off-net circuit that you're paying $2,000 a month for. And so we found some of these circuits that have been up for 7, 8, 10 years, and you've lost $250,000 that you're paying on this circuit that a customer canceled the first month.
Wow.
So
That's some big dollars, man.
Sorry, I know we're all over the place.
That's all right.
You should probably go back to your
Well,
outline.
I'm just curious, like when you're, I mean, I understand the pain your brother's feeling when he's living in this world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Then he comes to you, who's Mr., you're currently
yeah,
living in the tech world, right?
yep,
You're in the VC world. I mean, you're a
yeah.
guy, I mean, looking at your background, like you said, you're both in the Air Force, but you're also a Princeton grad and a Harvard grad, right? So,
That's right. So I thought this is an incredible opportunity.
okay,
We can fix this because people have fixed similar problems in other industries.
sure.
And yeah, you couldn't run a 7-Eleven with 21% inventory wrong,
Oh, no.
but it's a lot easier to go out and count bags of chips on the shelf than it is to go and take a look at every port that you have in a data center and look at all of these circuits that exist on beams of light and radio waves, that it's really difficult to go count all of these.
But that's
Uh,
more of the software, right? That's the Karma software power, right?
yep, that's exactly right. And so just the biggest part of it is bringing all of that information together into one system so that you can say, all right, the expenses that I have are linked to the inventory that I think I have, that are also linked to the sales that I have. And so once you have all of that information together in one spot, you can say, oh, that sale was canceled,
Right.
but I've still got expenses that are tied to it. That's
Sure.
an easy thing to run that report and say, oh, yeah, that customer order's gone. We still have inventory showing that circuit being active in our system, and we're still paying for the expenses, but the customer turned that off 2 years ago.
Sure.
So those are the sorts of things that you can do when you bring all that information together and you use the right tools um, to structure that data, rather than having one billing system, one
Mhm.
CRM system, an expense management system, and Excel spreadsheets, or one of the legacy telecom inventory systems that was written in the late 1990s,
Or
right? Yeah, exactly. And when those things don't talk to each other and you don't have the ability to see that data, and you have different people looking at different parts of the data, that you can do just incredible analytics on top of that.
yeah.
And
So
so,
it wasn't a hard sell to get you on board. It sounds like he presented the idea. It sounds like you were engaged because you saw the opportunity right from the start.
a big part of it was I trusted his opinion on him telling me that this was a big deal.
Got
And so early on, I was like, if this is such a big problem, why has no one solved this problem yet?
sure.
Um, and at the same time, I knew his experience was valid, right?
Okay.
So he was working at one of these huge telecom companies. He was telling me that there were millions of dollars going out the door every month that didn't need to. And I thought, all right, I don't know this industry. I trust him. I know we're both smart guys.
Yep.
I was in a place personally where I'd moved down from the Bay Area to Bakersfield because my wife was starting residency down here.
Hmm.
And so commuting back and forth to the Bay on a weekly basis was getting to
Right.
be too much. And so I thought, let's try it. Let's
Yeah.
give it some time. Let's see if the things that he's telling me are correct. And so, looking back, I did very little diligence on the problem itself,
Okay.
um, because I was like, I trust him. I know that what he's telling me. I didn't go talk to other telecom experts or anything like that.
Sure.
But I thought, all right, we'll figure this out.
Right.
And
Well,
worst case, we'll we'll crash and burn, and then we'll be on to the next thing.
that's
Um,
that's amazing to me. So did he have a business plan? Did he have a formal business plan he brought, or did you kind of jump in and help put something together? Or
Yeah, and so we did not have a formal business plan.
okay.
Uh, we had a clear list of assumptions that we thought it would take to make the business work.
Okay.
So since we didn't apply for any sort of debt financing, and we didn't go out and raise money from venture capitalists or even friends and family, we didn't spend the time to actually put it into a formal business plan.
Sure.
But we had, all right, here are the key metrics that we need to be able to hit for this business to work.
Right.
And some of those things came true, and some we were off by at least a factor of 2.
Right.
And so the key things for our business were basically, when we started, it was the pro service. And so it was, we'll go out and save a company money by turning off expenses that they don't need. And for that to work, we needed a particular density of expenses. So in a particular site, there needs to be at least either these many racks of equipment,
Sure.
or these many dollars. And then there needed to be some number, some percentage of defects within that space.
Sure.
And when I say defects, I mean, that's the
that's the circuits or whatever.
Exactly, right? So it's things that they're paying for that they don't need at the end of the day.
Sure.
So whether, and anything that can lead to that situation is a defect. So for whatever reason, they're paying for something they don't need to be paying for it. We can turn it off. We'll save them money. We'll get a cut of that. And so
you're off by a factor of 2 in that assumption. So as far in that assumption, or a different assumption?
There's a different assumption, which ended up being what we thought the percentage that our customers would be willing to pay us of the cost savings that we deliver. And so we were off by basically a factor of 2 on that. We thought our customers would be willing to pay twice as much as they were. And so those are basically the 3 main assumptions, plus how quickly can we get through those.
Right.
So if it takes us 2 years to make a decision on one circuit, then that's not going to be a good business model for us.
Sure.
But if you can do a certain number per week, then that can be a pretty good business to be in.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys now have this plan. You know you're off a little bit by the factors. Now, I'm trying to think back, because I think you left Arcanum, it was like around 2017 timeframe, somewhere in there. So you've got this period of time between 2017 and the point of profitability. You mentioned you didn't take any financing through formal channels. Can you talk to how you guys bootstrapped?
Yeah. So for anyone thinking about starting a company, you should really do one of 2 things. You should either wait to leave whatever your current job is until you have some amount of ability to pay yourself, or you should be prepared to not take a salary for a year or 2. Right?
Sure.
Or you can go out and either raise debt or raise professional investment or friends and family investment, if that's the flavor that you're going for. We did not want to raise money because my experience with our previous company, Arcanum, was if you don't have a product that people are willing to buy before you raise money, then you are going to give away a huge amount of the company before you get to that point.
You're talking the equity.
Equity, that's right. Particularly if you're dealing with professional investors.
Right.
And that's not an unfair thing, because there's a huge amount of risk in putting money into something before you've proven any sort of traction. And so we said, all right, we will be in an okay spot financially to not take salaries. And then we actually put in personal finances. But then, and I would not recommend anyone do this, we took a big chunk of our 401ks and put it into the company. And we, there's actually a way to do that that's in an IRS approved way where you can take, it's called a rollover for business startups. And basically the way that it works is you take money out of your 401k and you buy shares in your company. And for a company as risky as ours was, I would never recommend anyone do that.
I was going to point that out and say, based on our previous conversations, this is not, I repeat, not something we advocate.
I would not recommend doing that.
Yes.
It worked out okay for us. It actually worked out really well for us, but I would not recommend anyone do that. You know, we're fairly early in our careers, and so if we lost it all, then that would have been not a great outcome, but it would have been all right. But we believed in it. And the other thing is that we kept our expenses really low when we were first starting out.
Right.
So we didn't hire employees until we had customer contracts, which took much longer than we thought was going to be the case. We did the original software development ourselves. And even so, we still didn't pay ourselves salary for the first year or year and a half, something like that.
Wow.
And we again, there was a point where we did raise some debt, but that was just, you know, regular working capital type debt.
Okay.
But up until this point, it's been solely our personal funds that we put into the company.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think you start a company and just out of the gate you're going to be paying yourself, but you know, you got to have customers coming in. You got to have a product they want. There's all these things that need to line up, and you know, you got to be prepared not to take a salary for a period of time. That's
absolutely. And you know, at the time in our lives, it was a terrible time to start a company. So both of us had very young children. We still, you know, we're only 4 years past when that was, but right now I have a 7, a 4, and a 2-year-old, and my brother has a 7, a 5, and a 3-year-old. Right. So we went from taking pretty decent salaries to nothing for, you know, a year and a half. And even still, you know, in a bootstrap company, you know, we're not paying ourselves huge salaries. We're you know, the whole idea is to keep as much money into the company as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
So, you know, the big thing was having some sort of, you know, a nest egg to be able to put into the company. Fortunately, we have extremely supportive spouses and
I was going to ask about that.
families.
Family's important, right? And you mentioned you got small kids. Your wife was in residency at the time you started this. So
yeah.
Support of the family was huge for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, you know, particularly early on, because the one thing we haven't mentioned is in telecom, the sales cycles are incredibly long.
Sure.
So, you know, the first year of working on the company, trying to get sales, you know, there were definitely some times where it was like, I don't know if this is going to work.
Right. Yeah.
And even since then, since we've had employees, I mean, there have been a couple times where, fortunately not anytime recently, but there were a couple times where we had to take money out of our own bank accounts and put it into the company so that we could make salary for,
payroll,
our employees. Yeah. I mean, we had payroll, you know, and fortunately we've been, we were able to make it through those tougher times. But that was one of the really great things about doing this with my brother, is that, you know, if it had been, I think, anyone else, I definitely would have thrown in the towel, you know, before getting to this side of it. But, you know, we had our lives and our finances and all of that tied up in it. So there was just no way we could quit. So.
Sure. Well, like you said, it worked out. So you guys reached a point of profitability, to where you're now. It's starting to pay back, what you invested and everything. So that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And so it's been, COVID was a really interesting, difficult time for everyone. The telecom industry had a really both tough, stressful, but also, there was an incredible amount of growth in the telecom industry. And so
Sure.
you saw just crazy things as everyone went to remote learning, remote work, where people were picking up spares from warehouses, old equipment that had been decommissioned, and just throwing it into the network to get more
Really?
bandwidth. And the price of chips went through the roof. You couldn't get optics. Just it was a crazy, crazy time,
Mhm.
which didn't really benefit us that much, because we were still able to travel because we were, essential employees,
Okay.
um, or essential workers. But, there were a lot of people trying to figure out, all right, what's going to happen. And
Right.
so with the long sales cycles for telecom, we had a lot of meetings. We talked to a lot of people. People were really interested in what we were
Mhm.
doing, but no one was commissioning capital projects for software
Yeah.
or anything like that. Um, but the benefit is that now, as we're coming out of it, we just have explosive demand
Sure.
for everything that we're doing, primarily our software. Um, that's not to say last year was still our best year ever. Um, you know, multiple millions of dollars in revenue.
Mhm.
We ended the year in the best shape financially we've ever been.
Right.
Um, we we actually issued stock options to all of our full-time employees.
Nice.
We were able to do bonuses for everyone at the end of the year. Um, and it was just a really crazy year for everyone, but we were still able to come through it pretty well.
That's excellent. So, I look at COVID, right? And you're talking about, that things were changing and, there's a period of kind of slowed down and you got this long sales cycle, but did you
Yeah.
keep all your team on? Were you able to keep your full-time employees like on for the whole time?
We were,
Good.
and that- early on, that was one of those times where we had to dip into our personal bank accounts and make sure that everyone still got paid.
Sure.
And the biggest thing for Frank and me is that the people that we work with, we think that we work for them, right?
Okay. Yep.
And people are very quick to say, oh, you guys are the best guys I've ever worked for. And it's like, no, no, we work for you.
Right.
um, and one of the kind of most gratifying thing that we've seen are employee reviews, like on Glassdoor and things like that, where
Mhm.
we're actually creating an incredible place for these people to work, that they really love it. They really feel like they're doing something incredible, and they really feel like we care about them. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the other things about having not raised money, is that not taking any external investment, is that we still own the entire company.
Sure.
So when we give the whole team the last 2 weeks of the year off and all of the week of Thanksgiving off, um, just to have some downtime, that's something that we can do, right?
Right.
And so that's been a really cool thing, to see that, look, when we're working and people are traveling every week for
Yeah.
16 weeks in a row, like that gets tough,
That's brutal.
right? But
Yeah.
there's part that, and that's just part of the job, right? Like we can't
Mhm.
do physical audit of data centers remotely. That's the whole point.
Right.
um, and so there are parts of the job that are just tough.
Mhm.
That's for our field techs who travel. We have network engineers who don't travel. But even on the network engineering circuit design side, you know the thing that you don't think about is that these telecom circuits get moved frequently,
Oh,
right?
really?
And so there are times, and so that always has to happen during maintenance windows. And so there are a lot of times where, our work starts at midnight and we've got from midnight to 6 a.m. In whatever time zone we're working
Mm-hmm.
to do these grooms.
Sure.
Right? And so we've never had anyone say, all right, that's not my job, or I'm not willing to step into that.
Right.
And that's just part of the culture that we built, which has been super cool to see.
It's a testament to the servant leadership model too. I mean, that you guys are doing, which, amen to you guys, and kudos for recognizing that. And I've worked with you. I know how you are. I mean, you understand the value of people, and
Yep.
not a lot of leaders really get that. So I definitely applaud you, and I'm sure the team would say the same thing. Like you said, your Glassdoor ratings are pretty high, and that's always something that speaks about the company leadership as well.
Yeah.
The thing I look at with equity, you mentioned too, you gave everybody equity,
Yep.
and that's awesome because you get that buy-in, right? But I think a lot of people mistake that when they do a startup company, they start giving equity right at the beginning for no reason.
Yep.
To me, equity is one of those things you want to hold back a little bit until people get a little traction in the company and you really understand who they are.
Yep.
Then start giving that out based on performance, right?
Yeah. And so that's something that we've done. So we other than for two of our kind of C-level guys that we brought in, that we'd known and worked with for many years previously, we didn't give anyone equity on the first day of their job.
Right.
What we did do for a lot of people, for everyone, is basically have something that kind of feels like a probationary period, even though we didn't tell them it was a probationary period.
Yep.
And then after 3 months, said, okay, you're incredible. We want you to stay with us forever. Here's an equity grant, and it's backdated to your first day, right?
Oh, that's smart.
And so the vesting would start on the first day that they were there, and then have a standard vesting schedule. And so for people who aren't familiar with vesting, basically what that means is that you're given a chunk of stock options, which is the right but not the obligation to purchase the stock at a particular price, and you basically earn that over a period of time, anywhere from 3 years would be low, 5 years would be high, 4 years is pretty standard. And so the fairly standard terms is it's a 1-year cliff, which means if you leave before day 364, then you get nothing. But on the 1-year anniversary, 25% of it vests, and then from there it's straight line. So it's really a phenomenal way to both incentivize people to do the best they can for the company, but then also really important for us is to reward people for the work that they've done and the
Sure.
value that they've created, which is, we were really happy that we were able to do that. We didn't do that early on in the company just because we didn't know what was going to happen, and we weren't sure it was going to be worth the expense of actually setting up a stock option plan. But once we got to the point where it's looking like we're really going to make it, that was something we definitely wanted to do.
That's very cool. So with COVID, you mentioned everybody's traveling. They had to keep traveling, right?
Yep.
What additional measures did you guys start re-looking at safety procedures? Did you guys instill a whole bunch of different protocols? What was your reaction as a company to that?
So for the first probably 2 months, we basically just hunkered down and didn't travel. And we said, all right, we're going to take a pause. We're going to see what this looks like. And we're going to spend time doing nothing but focusing on the software. So we took our people who had spent time or primarily data center technicians and network engineers and circuit designers. And we said, okay, we've got some time. We can do some really cool things in terms of building out demo data and building out environments and things that will help with the sales process.
Sure.
So we took people and put them to work in kind of a different role than they typically would have been. So we got value out of that. They got value out of that. But there was just no way to continue the company going on without,
Right.
without money coming in. And so basically for the guys who had to travel, we said, look, are you okay traveling? Because we weren't going to say, look, it's either travel or it's your job. And fortunately, again, with the culture that we built, it was readily apparent to the guys that had to travel. It's like, look, you know, I don't want this karma thing to go away. So yeah, we're going to do it. And so they've just been absolutely exceptional for us. So they, you know, take all of the precautions that you can, wear masks when they travel, and basically, you know, stay in the hotel room and DoorDash food. And then the nice thing about data centers is that they're climate controlled, they're access controlled, they're, you know, a lot of airflow. So that if you had to pick a place to be, they're safer than most. And fortunately, we haven't had anyone come down with COVID, which has been really phenomenal.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Speaking to marketing channels, right? To kind of switch gears here a little bit. When you operate in a B2B type business setting like you're doing, where you have a very, you know, narrow niche, what do you guys do for marketing? Is there any preferred methods or channels that you do?
Yeah, so something that we did not appreciate early on was how valuable, I'll call them trade shows, but conferences and trade shows.
Okay.
Because, and so we didn't go to any conferences or trade shows for the first year and a half or so. And just from advice that we've gotten from some of our kind of informal advisors, they said, look, you just have to go to these places. And so the first one that we went to actually just happened to be in Denver, but we went to it, and people that we'd been trying to get in touch with for 6 or 12 months by email and LinkedIn and things like that, basically never responded to us. Walk up to them and they say, I didn't realize you were a real person. I thought you were a bot, right? Like it's this sort of thing where it's like when someone's standing in front of you and wanting to talk to you, people are much more receptive to saying, hey, let's have a conversation. Like, tell me what you're doing. How can I help?
Right.
And particularly in our industry, where you've got to talk to kind of at the very minimum a director or a VP or a C-level person to get any sort of traction. You know, you're just never going to get to those people by email or LinkedIn or, you know, tagging them on Twitter or something like that.
Facebook.
Yeah, exactly, right? Unless you've got a personal connection to them and someone who's going to say, look, you should talk to these guys. There's just no way to, or even cold calling people. I mean, picking up the phone and cold calling people, some people can do that. That just makes my skin crawl. But even that, I mean, people have kind of really soured on anyway. But when you're at a conference and tickets are, you know, $500 or $5,000 to get into the conference, and your one job is to go there and talk to other people and find business opportunities and have fun, people are a lot more relaxed and more willing to talk to you. And the nice thing for the telecom conferences is, for the most part, they put them in nice places, right? So there's some that move around, but then there's you know, Miami, there's one in Hawaii every year, which is a big one.
That's cool.
And so, you know, people are in a good mood. They're much more interested in talking to you about whatever you've got going on, if not for just the reason that their company's paying them to be there to do that. The personal referrals are always good, but at least from what we found, you know, unless the person's already looking for something that you're doing and you're like, oh, this is a problem that I can solve. Those have been not super great for us in terms of opening new doors. But one thing that we found is that just by being around and being out there and going to these conferences and talking to people,
Mm-hmm.
just the fact that you're not the brand new guys
Yeah.
gives you a level of credibility. It's like, holy
Once
crap, you guys are still around doing this? Like, you must have been successful. And that's part of it, where just being able to be in business for an amount of time will really actually buy you some credibility.
establish some credence there. Yeah, definitely.
Well,
Yeah, the thing is, I definitely think marketing is something a lot of new businesses and startups don't give enough respect to, especially like trying to figure out your individual path, right? Because there's not a one size fits all. It all really depends on your product and your target market. And I've said it before on other podcasts, and I'll say it a million times over, is you really need to think about your marketing strategy. You need to figure out what works for you and just go 110% that way, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And one thing that's been really great for us as a company just in the last 6 to 8 months is that we're now a direct Microsoft partner.
Nice.
We've become what's called a cloud embed program partner. We're really able to, we're working with Microsoft. We're getting a lot of the Microsoft cred. We've got a number of other announcements that are going to be coming out. And we're finally getting to that tipping point where that's actually driving inbound leads, which is super cool.
Congratulations on that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. It's been just really, really cool. So now we're working directly with Microsoft on a number of different angles, because our software runs on the Microsoft cloud.
Okay.
But the first thing that you've got to do to become a Microsoft partner is you've got to be around for 2 years, right? So the first thing they asked us for to be a direct partner, which is great because we can transact on behalf of our customers with Microsoft, was 2 years of audited financial statements. And so, as a startup, that's a tough thing to do.
Sure.
And if we were trying to do that right out of the gate, it just
you got to establish yourself, right? It's one of those things.
Yeah.
I have to ask, because you have such a diverse background. I mentioned it a little bit before, but the Air Force background, the Princeton background, the Harvard background.
Yep.
And then obviously you participated. You were in the venture capital Silicon Valley piece for a while.
Yep.
When you come into Carma and you look at Carma, what did you bring in that served you the most, right?
Yeah. And so I think the biggest thing that I brought was, aside from technical operations and finance type stuff, but it's really just problem solving and the ability to jump in and learn something new. So we were not experts on the Microsoft Dynamics platform when we first started. None of our developers were really deep into the Dynamics platform. But now I would say that we're one of the best Dynamics shops out there. And it's really just been a matter of that continual learning of, all right, what's the problem we've got to solve? What are the different tools and options that we have available to us? And then let's go focus just all of our effort on making that successful and learning what we need to learn.
Sure.
So, I had some software background. I was never a professional developer, but I ran our development team up until very, very recently when we hired our a CTO that we'd known for 15 years.
Okay.
And it was just this sort of thing where you jump in and got to learn.
Yeah, jump in with both feet, man. The trial by fire, right?
Exactly, right. And so I feel like I'm a fairly sharp guy, but just being able to jump in and learn new things and to figure out how to solve a problem, I think is the biggest thing that I brought in.
You definitely have that skill. I can attest to that. I can remember some really good times at Arcanum where you executed that. So
yeah, and stubborn as hell. So
That's very true.
yeah.
I mean, that's one thing we haven't even touched on here is during this whole thing, you went through some personal issues too, right? With the family, which, and those aren't easy things to get through. Do you feel comfortable talking about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I had found out I had cancer when I was at Arcanum, went through treatment and he was cleared at that point, but then had a recurrence in 2019, which was much worse than the first time around. So I had to go through chemo, I had surgery. At that point, my wife was still a resident. We had just had our third child. And so, a month earlier, my mom had died of pancreatic cancer after a 14-month struggle.
Mhm.
So there was quite a bit going on. And, it was the sort of thing where it was very focusing on, all right, well, I'm going to get through this, and then we're going to keep the company going. And we're going to lean on the people that we have to lean on. But fortunately, we were successful to make it through treatment and all that. I got a new look, which I'm continuing to keep. And yeah, it was definitely the sort of thing where you're sitting around, trying to think about, because you've got lots of time to think when you're going through
Sure.
treatment, right? Like you're sitting in a chemo chair, you're sitting in recovery from surgery, you're not out, playing basketball or doing any of the fun stuff you would typically be doing.
Sure.
But a lot of it was like, all right, well, is this how I want to spend my life? And the thing that was just really, really great is how everyone in the company was rooting for me, and everyone couldn't wait to have me back and all of that. And that was just the biggest thing of get through it for my family, get through it for the people that I work with, because we want to keep this thing going. So
Yeah, I definitely was glad to hear that you were cleared the second time, and I think it's a testament to your stubbornness, Joe.
Exactly. Well, the thing that was funny is I still kept writing code when I was sitting in the chemo chair, and so we definitely had to do extra code reviews because chemo brain is a real thing. But yeah, we actually made some really great progress on the software during those days. But yeah,
That is amazing to me when I think about all that you were going through at the time, and you still, like, you guys pushed on, and to where you are now. That's incredible, and I admire that.
Yep.
Talking to the listeners here, is there anything that you would ask them relative to Karma? Like, how could they help you grow Karma or get the word out more? Or is there anything that you would ask of the listeners to kind of help, grow the company and, improve you guys?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I've found, because I have a number of friends who have started companies, a number of classmates from Harvard Business School, and the B2C companies, all of the consumer facing companies get tons and tons of press. And that's important because that's their target audience, right?
Yeah.
Unless you own a telecom carrier or a data center, your listeners are probably not my target audience.
Sure.
But if they know anyone who is, or if they have friends, family, anyone who's in the industry, have them check us out.
Absolutely.
Just check us out, Karma with a C, so karma.net. And we're all over the internet. But yeah, just push us along to anyone working in this industry.
I will include those links at the end of the podcast, so they'll be apparent for the audio podcast and for the video on YouTube. So anybody wants to reach out to Joe, that'll be available. Before we wrap up here, Joe, any words of advice to small business owners, entrepreneurs getting their feet wet, going out, taking the risk like you guys did?
Yep.
What would you tell people entering into that forum?
You've got to be an expert in the industry you're going to be working in. So whether that's you or whether that's someone on your team, there's nothing that substitutes for that kind of experience, or if not experience, knowledge, right? So if you are thinking of starting a company in an industry that you don't know and you don't have someone on your team, that shouldn't be the be all end all. Absolutely don't do it. But you've got to go out and learn absolutely as much as you can about that industry, who your potential customers are and who your potential competitors are. And getting traction of, hey, someone wants to pay you this money for this product or service that you're going to be providing, is the absolute thing that you've got to focus on. And if you can stay in your current role longer until you get that validation, so that you don't have to worry about paying for food and paying for your kids' clothes and things like that, definitely do that as long as you can. And then be prepared for it to take twice as long as you think it's going to, because it's probably going to take twice as long as that. So know your customers, know what people are going to be willing to pay you to do your product or service, and then know who's going to be out there who's going to offer the same thing or something very similar for half what you're willing to take for it. Because that was the thing that we ran into quite a bit, was we had this awesome service that we thought people would be willing to pay a certain amount for. And we got a lot of people telling us that that was the case, that they would pay at a certain price point. But the people who were affirming our assumptions before we went out and started getting customers weren't the people who were going to be writing the checks. Right? Those were the people saying, yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah, of course. I'm not going to pay you to do that. But I'm sure most people would. And so getting that real market feedback is why it's so valuable, and why investors are willing to take such a smaller piece of companies that have been validated by the market, because the risk is just that much lower. And so once you've got that sorted out, know what it's going to cost you to deliver that service or that product, and then continually check your assumptions, validate your assumptions, and make sure that the model works.
Words of wisdom from a guy who's been through the ringer in multiple startups and came out with the success here. So Joe, thank you very much for being on the podcast today. Appreciate you taking the time. This has been very informative, and I always learn something about my guests when they're on here, so I appreciate that. For everybody listening, if you want to reach out to Joe, I'll include links in the end of the podcast here. And be well, be safe, and be productive. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. To reach out and learn more, you can reach Joe on LinkedIn under Dr. Joseph McDermott. Also, you can find biography on karma.net under the About section. Additional links to items discussed are below, such as karma.net and Frank's LinkedIn presence, as well as the Arcanum Alloys website. If you want to recommend somebody to appear on the podcast as a guest, please email us at info@opsqc.com. If you're interested in sponsoring a podcast, please reach out to us at the same email. We'd love to have your support.